Welcome to the Social Impact Level Up podcast. This is where we blur the lines between business, nonprofit, and impact. I'm your host, Wendie V, and in season 3, we're redefining success for social entrepreneurs looking to grow their revenue. If you have reality-changing ideas, this is the place for you. Let's jump right into today's episode. If you're looking to diversify your revenue streams, listen up, because this episode is going to tell you how you can use regulation crowdfunding to make a bigger impact. I'm going to have my friend, Devin Thorpe, tell us exactly how we can be part of the super crowd. Devin, who are you and how do you make an impact?
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me on the show, Wendie. You are just great. What a great host. What a dynamic human being you are. You are just amazing. And thank you for joining us at Supercrowd Baltimore. What a fun event. It turned out to be great in so many ways, but, in part because of the great energy you brought to the table. It was really fun to have you there. And we're excited to have you speak at Supercrowd 24 too. So thank you very, very much. So I'm Devin Thorpe, and I run the Super Crowd. It's a business that organizes these events, and we also host a streaming television show called the Superpowers for Good. So we're trying to do our best to make a difference, like you do.
I love that, and it's a whole ecosystem that you have. I've gotten sucked in, and I'm actually very excited about it. There's very few communities that excite me anymore, and your community is very intriguing to me. Now, I know it's full of thought leaders, and you find great voices and bring them to these various platforms, whether it's your events, your live streams, and you amplify other people's messages around doing good and making an impact. So how did you come up with this as what you wanted to spend your time on?
It I have to confess it was a little bit accidental, but it goes back to a childhood experience. When I was 11 years old, back in 1976, the Teton Dam failed, and this was a dam out in Idaho near a little town called Rexburg. And Rexburg was almost completely destroyed by the flood that came from this dam failure. And so communities from around the Western United States kind of volunteered to go visit and help dig muck and mud out of basements and such. And my dad invited me to tag along. And I thought that sounded like a good idea. So I did, and went, and we dug muck and mud out of basements all day. And now recently I went back and I looked all around town, and I was really surprised, but I couldn't find the statue that they had erected in my honor. I don't know what happened to that, but I really figured I had made a big difference in the world by showing up as an 11-year-old kid to dig muck and mud out of basements. Of course, I didn't. We were just all helping, and I probably didn't make a difference at all in hindsight. But it was a life-changing experience for me. It really was, and I decided that I would never miss an opportunity to serve other people, and I did. I did miss other opportunities to serve, but it certainly has been a guiding light, guiding experience in my life. And as I began my career, I decided that I would devote the first half of my career to making money and the second half to social impact. And so about 13 years ago, my wife and I went to China for a year where we taught school at the university at South China University of Technology. And then while I was there, I wrote a book and launched a second career. And when I came back and started, promoting that book and doing that kind of thing, I ended up taking an assignment from Forbes to write about social impact. And about that time, Google created what it called Google Hangouts at the time. And I think they still have a product they call that. It's a little different, but it was a live YouTube video streaming tool. And so I started doing live interviews on Forbes using this technology, and just had a ball. And so I've kind of kept the show going. I took a year off to run for Congress, but I've kept the show going for the last 13 years and have had just an amazing amount of fun. And so that kind of got me started in this work and building a network, right? I even got a chance to interview Bill Gates a couple of times. And so it's really been a profound experience. And, that's why I encourage people to podcast, because you build such an incredible network. And so it was a fairly natural thing after a few years to begin organizing conferences, because that gave me an opportunity to gather the community I was building through my network and bring people together around that. And so we're just having a ball with it, just having a ball. And it really does create an amazing energy when you get great people in the room to talk about what they're doing.
Want to amplify your impact today? Join my community, the Social Impact Level Up Collective, where social entrepreneurs just like you meet monthly to inspire world-changing ideas. You'll get access to my top courses and resources, speakers, and exclusive community events. Hop in right now at wendievelos.com/collective. Yeah, I was not anticipating being so excited about the experience. I came back and I have told literally everybody about it. I'm like, listen, there were trains and they were amazing people. What more could you want? And they fed us, right? Like this was a great ticket for the price. Now,
Yeah.
I think that the thing that struck me the most though out of the day, and then I'll explain to people why I said there were trains, was you show up in Baltimore at the B&O Railroad Museum, which is where you held this event, but you hold them
Mhm.
all over the country. So I assume they're at equally amazing venues. And when we came, it was a room full of people that you did not know. But by the time you heard people start talking and having sidebar conversations on the breaks, you wanted to know every single person in the room. And so it was more than the speakers coming, but it was I feel like I have a place here amongst thought leaders or amongst people that are changing the world and being a moving force in whatever it is that they're doing. And that was a really interesting difference from coming to just listen to speakers.
Yeah. And I remember, one of the kind of the big surprises for the day was Venroy July. And I think you've got him scheduled on your show. But, he spoke with such passion about these issues, right? About, you know, Black empowerment and social justice and and from a very practical way. I mean, he's a real estate developer and lawyer, right? And yet he's passionate about, and you begin to see the intersection, right, of all of these different factors that business done right, done well, can have a real social impact. It can make a difference in the world, and that is just such a profound insight to really feel that and see that. And in Baltimore, we certainly did.
Yeah, and I think that from that experience, because I definitely secured his seat. And I was like, wait a second. Uh, what I took away from that was his way of thinking is the way of thinking that a lot of people could have and could choose to have, to think about how can I develop communities to give them back to communities. And another voice that you had there is that Stephen Schaff, right? He's going to be also on the podcast, and
Okay.
he's been thinking the same thing. And I was like, how many real estate developers would we need to really transform communities to be thinking in these different ways, right? But it's every sector, every group has their own things that you could be doing professionally and personally to give back, to make a difference, and to really help empower people and communities in ways that had not really even been possible before. And crowdfunding, what I learned in this whole experience, because we were not only talking about all these amazing impact ideals in people's work and just these very inspirational topics, but the core of it was that there is a mechanism that a lot of people don't understand right now. And there's still a lot of mystery. And even in my brain, after listening to you talk about it for an hour and give very detailed information, I still wonder, how can we make this particular strategy more accessible to people?
Yeah, that is a critical step. And one of the things that I remember we talked about in the very earliest days after the passage of the Jobs Act, which enabled regulation crowdfunding, we were talking as a group, and we recognized that the regulations were burdensome. They enabled something that had been impossible legally up to that point, but it was also difficult. And I remember we talked about the technology would solve this problem. And I have to admit, I'm disappointed that it hasn't happened yet, right? The basic infrastructure is there to do all these tasks. But here's what's changing. Generative AI is fundamentally altering our world and in radical ways that I couldn't have anticipated weeks ago. Weeks ago, I find myself doing now with AI, and it is just astounding. But one of the things that you can do with AI is you can reduce the time to prepare documents from days or weeks to hours. So you can build a business plan and draft your Form C, which is the required disclosure document, in a matter of hours by giving generative AI, and I'm talking about the free generative AI, like Chat GPT 3.5 can do this, right? You say, I need to write a business plan. Help me write an outline for my business plan. And then you just ask the generative AI to write each section of that business plan one step at a time, giving it some clues about things. And, you say, maybe what do you want to know before you write this? And it'll tell you, and in a day, you could write a comprehensive business plan that is completely professional, and it's done, right? And then you hand it to your attorneys or hand it to the portal, and you are done. And it's just amazing. Now, I realize it takes a little bit of extra training now to try and lean into that technology. But I tell you, I showed my wife how to do this. And my wife is an old school teacher. She's a retired school teacher. And she was able to immediately begin using ChatGPT as a tool for all kinds of things. And I tell you, it's a game changer. And layer on this, right? Now what's coming? Across the landscape, everywhere we turn, all the tools we're using have generative AI built in, right? So as we go through our experience over the next year, I'm talking the next 12 months, not the next 12 years, the next 12 months, everything is going to get this generative AI kind of thinking built into it. And very suddenly, we're going to be able to put together our submissions in a tenth the time they required a year ago. Think about that. In 24 months, we'll have reduced the effort 90%. And then add to, there'll be tools very soon, immediately, that'll put together the whole social media campaign, the whole email campaign, the whole everything. It may be one step at a time, but you'll be able to, it'll do it for you. It's going to be amazing, amazing, amazing. And then, of course, on the investing side, I've already created tools for my community to use to accelerate due diligence. So you don't have to spend hours and hours and hours on the due diligence. You're able to cut that way back, make an analysis more quickly, make a decision about investing in a deal. And let me tell you, I look at what's going on in the stock market, and I look at what's going on in the crowdfunding market, and I'm moving my money from the stock market into the crowdfunding market because the returns are better. Just flat out, simply, I can make more money there.
I know. And you challenged me to go move $5 over there at the event. And I have yet to do it because of a couple of things you mentioned. So I do have a follow-up question to that. And then I want to get into the investor side pretty heavily because I think that we have both groups would be listening to this podcast, right?
Sure.
So on the side of the person who's coming to this idea of needing money and wanting to find a diverse funding stream that is not their general revenue or not donations or whatever. The first question I have is, and I understood this is something nonprofits and businesses can both use as a strategy. And this, like you said, has regulation around it because the government tends to make everything difficult whenever they say that you can do it. But there's ways and people to help you, like lawyers and folks that you can bring on to help you navigate, which I learned through your network exist, right? Which is great. And there's resources that you can read to understand it. But you mentioned a couple things in there, that there's a portal. And can you explain what that is about and why one needs a portal? And then what that does for people, I guess. And then two, you kind of said in the regulations could be a little burdensome. Can you give a little peek into what would people be asked to do? And then the third part is something that we haven't even talked about yet, but I think it fits in here from what my understanding is as you decide you're going to give something to investors, you have to make this deal enticing for them. So you got to give them a little thing, equity or something. So I guess it's sort of one, two, three. One was,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think you wrote them down. So if you can remember
Yes, I
for me
did.
the order, go ahead, because I was just going off the top of my head of my understanding of this whole complex thing.
Yeah.
And I think you could really help people make a decision for them in this next soundbite. Is this for me or not?
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. Great question. So the portals, think of them kind of as like the brokers. Think of them as the Goldman Sachs of crowdfunding, right? And there are dozens of them that are active on the planet doing this, that are registered with FINRA, registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission. These are formal entities that exist that operate to help match up investors and the issuers, the people who are trying to raise money, and they will help you do everything you need to do. They can't do it for you entirely, but they will all help you, coach you, guide you, and so you can get started amazingly easily, right? So it really is an exciting process. So the second question you asked is, what is the burden? Well, the burden really relates to all of the disclosures you're required to make, right? You are required to disclose your financial condition. You're just required to explain the risks associated with your business offering, and to present kind of a business plan, and present some real details about the management, the plan to build the business going forward, and how you'll repay the money, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like I say that, AI can help you do all of these things now. It's exciting to me, just amazing, amazing that how much help it can be. But you've got to do it. There's no way around it. You have to do it. The key is now, the exciting thing to me is that it's so much easier today than it was a year ago because of AI. It's just amazingly easier, right, to use AI. Okay, so then the last thing is you have to give them something. You're right. And so what you give them is a security, but it doesn't have to be ownership in your business. Now, sometimes ownership in your business is really an appealing thing to sell because you don't necessarily have to give them anything else. And so you could, if you're going to keep your business for a long time, you just tell them that we're going to grow this business for a long time. And then eventually we'll sell this and you'll get more money back than you gave me to get your ownership. That's the plan. But you might also just sell debt. And you say, okay, I'll borrow $100 and I'll pay you back with 10% interest over the next 5 years, just like a car loan. There are a lot of crowdfunding deals now using what's called revenue-based financing. And here you'd say, okay, I'm going to pay all of the investors collectively, say 3 or 4 or 5% of the revenue, until I pay them back 2 times as much money as they gave me. So people look at that, they say, well, that's pretty easy to understand. I give you $1, you give me $2 back. I can understand that. And it might take 6 years. Okay, I get that. I get that. In 2 years, I should have twice as much money as I gave you. I like that. I don't have any other way to do that. So there are a lot of different ways to structure your deal. But yeah, you do have to figure out what's going to appeal to your audience in order to get them to invest. And I think it's an important step, and it's easy to misalign. It's easy to misalign.
Is there help from someone or people? Who do you go to for help with that question of what should I offer? If you're a business owner and you're like scratching your head, like what is the right solution for my business? Now I've done mess my hair up asking this question.
Yeah. Most of the attorneys that help in this space are good at that, right? Because it, in many aspects, is a combination. It's a question at the intersection of your business and legal. So don't let your attorney impose terms on you. But at the same time, you can rely on the attorney to give you some counsel, some advice on that. And the portals also will advise you. The attorneys get mad when the portals do that, but the portals are, in fact, doing it. They're giving you advice and templates to use. And I would say it's not crazy, but I would encourage you to be careful, right? An attorney is probably a better source than the portal for picking the right offering terms for your deal, but those templates often work just fine. I have to admit that the templates are successful in raising a lot of money.
And you're saying, AI and templates and all these things are helpful. There's also obviously hire a professional to do this with you. So there's a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
different resources that one could access. And then it's also I think probably the mental decision of what am I willing to part with in my business, which is probably a very personal and deep conversation with self and others who have that impact in your business, whether it's your board or, partners or whatever. And so I assume that there's some sort of like a little bit of thought that has to go into this before you just go on a portal and start like, I want to offer people double their money back.
Exactly. Exactly. You've got to be thoughtful, but the opportunities here are amazing. And you know, I want you to think about this, right? If you may be thinking about getting an SBA loan, right? And as you begin to dig into that, you may realize that there's an equity component required that you can't meet. Well, crowdfunding may be the way to meet that equity requirement. If you're doing a real estate transaction, real estate is really the obvious case, but oftentimes in a real estate transaction, you'll have senior debt and junior debt and equity, and you'll have the owner, the kind of the developer might have an equity piece, and then he raises money and they get little different terms, and all these different people get a layer of the capital stack, right? They call it the capital stack, right? And oftentimes the role of crowdfunding is to fill a gap in the capital stack that no one else will fill. And it allows you, $100,000 raised from crowdfunding might allow you to complete $1 million deal, right? That otherwise couldn't get done. So it's really an exciting place. And of course, I often think about the small deals. A lot of people, the vast majority of crowdfunding deals are small, but you can raise up to $5 million that way. I publish on Substack, my newsletter and show, and Substack raised $5 million on WeFunder, one of the primary portals, and they may raise $5 million in one day, right? So it's amazing the opportunities that are out there. And then using Regulation A, a related crowdfunding tool, it's more expensive to do a Regulation A offering, more legal especially. The biggest difference is the Securities and Exchange Commission thoughtfully reviews your disclosure documents and gives you feedback. Usually there's a cycle, right? You submit, they review, you submit, resubmit, they re-review, et cetera, et cetera. So it takes months and lots of attorney's fees, but that you can raise up to $75 million under Regulation A. So it's, and yet you can still raise from the crowd in the same way. So it's amazing to see the potential, right? It's unlimited almost. It's, most of us as entrepreneurs are thinking about how do we raise tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And yet this topic really is relevant to those who are trying to figure out how to raise $5 million, $10 million, $50 million as well. So,
Yeah,
very cool.
just the other day, I want to get to the investor side in a minute, but just the other day, I had a business plan come across my desk from a person I was connecting with, and in their sort of impact statement included an option for crowdfunding, and it was really interesting. And this person was like, "I'm not sure exactly what to do with this. Now I have the go ahead, but now I've got to execute." And I said, I have a link for you. Let me send you to the Super Crowd event because I feel like this is exactly what you're looking for. And so all of these details are things that you talk about in different presentations and facets at the different Super Crowd events. And people can either choose to come or they can choose to, virtually join if it's not in their area. And so a lot of this knowledge, I just want to kind of move to the investor side, is shared from both the perspective of the person who might want to come and explore crowdfunding as a solution, but also there are impact investors in the room at the same time, which sometimes I find it difficult to get those two people into the same space. And I'm trying to do exactly like what you're doing here, which I find magical. So can you go into that investor mode for a second and kind of give us an idea of, are these people with deep pockets and real estate developers, or are they like everyday people like me who are using this? Or is it everyone? What's going on?
It runs the gamut. It runs the gamut. At Supercrowd Baltimore, we had some people there who have serious means, right? And I don't know that I don't think we had anybody there who is a billionaire, right? I don't think there were any billionaire and probably no centimillionaires, but I think there were some, a couple of decamillionaires in the room, right? So folks who have at least 10 million bucks of net worth. So there was some money in the room. But just as interestingly, there were a lot of people there who I think are salaried employees working for, quasi-governmental agencies like the Baltimore Development Corporation. And the Baltimore Development Corporation had great programs. And what I began to see is how people in the room were beginning to connect the dots. Oh, if I use this piece over here and combine that with some crowdfunding, I'll be able to do the crowdfunding more easily. And the crowdfunding will enable me to do a bigger project more successfully. So there are opportunities to combine this grant with this loan program with the crowdfunding. And suddenly, like again, it's kind of the capital stack discussion, right? You bring all these things together and you can accomplish so much more. And so we saw that. But then there's also an aspect that I just love, right? You can almost see the light going on with people, who are salaried employees who help manage these money programs. And they're suddenly realizing, wait a minute, I personally can put $5 in this deal. I could put $100 in that deal. I could put $200 in that deal. I could be an investor. It's not just about, the company I work for that has this $8 million grant program. No, I can participate. I can make a difference. The light goes on. It's exciting, right? And it's scary. And I got to tell you, that's why I really tried to get people committed to do that $5 investment with Climatize, because the reality is that the first one is hard to do. It's kind of like, well, golly, I've never invested in before. And how do I do this? And, it takes 10 minutes to do the first one. You can spend as much time doing due diligence as you want, but the reality is if you're going to spend $5, it doesn't matter. It's throwaway money for all of us, right? So you go and you can do it in 10 minutes and you can say, wow, I'm an investor now. I'm like, I've done it. And it didn't hurt. You know, nothing happened to me, that no one came and repossessed my car, and my house is still here. My apartment's still here. It's all good. I can do this. And so once you've done it once, it's easier to do it again and again and again. And so I remember I did my first one about 4 years ago, my first impact investment via crowdfunding. And since then, I've done dozens and dozens and dozens. I just have piles of them. And it's so fun. It's so fun. We have an impact cherub club that meets once a month where we get together and we talk about which deals we're going to do, and then we do them. So it's so fun. So fun.
I love that. And I'll tell you how I missed doing my homework, because this is an interesting part of it that I didn't even anticipate. I was on the platform in the room, walked out with the browser window open, intending to do it when I got home, as you do. You go through traffic, you get busy. And then I went back to it, and the deal that I wanted was gone. And I guess they expire, and I did not take note of the dates before when you first introduced me to this. And so there were other things there, but I had my heart set on that one. It was like the red dress, so that it's no longer in the store window. And you're like, wait a second. So could you speak a little bit about that before we kind of close up with one last question for you as a person, and then going on to where people can find you. Tell us about what the timing of this situation, because sometimes deals are not there for very long.
That's right. The offerings, and it varies, right? So the Substack deal was there for 1 day. 1 day. So, it really was a major case of the red dress effect. And nobody knew when they put it out there how it would go. I'm sure even the folks at Substack didn't anticipate that they would lock down the whole offering in 1 day. But the reality is you can do it. The issuers often put up a deal and end up extending. So it often goes longer than expected. It takes sometimes a long time for a company, an entrepreneur, to raise the money. It doesn't just magically come. You have to go ask people to invest. So there's that. But then, of course, as an investor, the ones that are most appealing, for whatever reason, are appealing to other people. Or if they're appealing to you, they're probably appealing to other people, and they'll get filled up, and then you won't be able to invest. So if you see one you like, I encourage you to invest quickly, not too quickly, be thoughtful, and then be sure to spend a reason, but move quickly.
Yes, I learned my lesson. So I wanted to make sure others could understand how that worked. So I wanted to ask you one question as a founder and as a person who I've seen literally travel around the country doing this work. How do you maintain your own well being so you can continue to show up and serve other people?
This is critical. It's just critical. And of course, right now, I'm feeling that in a dramatic way because I'm at the busiest part of my year and just, almost frantic. But I still try to make time to appreciate a little bit of nature. I'm so grateful. We've got a little tiny pond out in the backyard, and we have a great egret that comes by all the time. We've got some geese that just hatch their goslings and they're hanging out. We get to watch them, and we take time to just have moments with nature. I've got a bird feeder right out my window that I can watch. I try to just make sure I have that connection. I try to get a little bit of exercise every day. I am committed to trying to get enough sleep. I struggle with sleep sometimes, no different than anyone else, but I try to get a good 7 to 8 hours every night so that I can be my best self every day.
Oh, I love the sleep reminder because that is something that's crucial for all of us to just reset and get that sleep. And sometimes it takes a lot to get it set back when you don't get it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And for me, I don't know about everybody else, but for me, if I don't get a good night's sleep, I'm in trouble. I have a tough time. I can go through the exercise of doing my day, but I don't function as well emotionally or intellectually. So I really prioritize getting that full night's sleep.
Yeah, I know the intellectually part for sure. So this has been such a great time to just chat with you. Thank you for coming onto my show and just introducing me to this whole entire world. It's been amazing to see the network that you put together in your collective. And so thank you. Can you tell people where to find you? We've talked about Supercrowd a lot, but where to find you and what to look out for?
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you in our network now. We're just so grateful to be able to add you to our community, to have you at Supercrowd 24. That's great. And we're just, I'm so grateful that I discovered your podcast and listened to you and that you invited me to be on. It's just been amazing. So yeah, folks can find me at superpowers number 4 good.com. I've got a newsletter and show there. People can subscribe and that's, because the newsletter, I suspect it works like yours. If you respond, I get the message and I will respond to you. So you've got my email that way. So that's where I would suggest you go. Superpowers number 4 good.com.
Yes, and you are very much responsive to people in your inbox because you respond directly to me. So I appreciate that. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for listening to another episode of the Social Impact Level Up podcast. Thanks for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed the conversation, and we look forward to having you come back. If you're curious about what we shared, make sure you check down in the show notes below. And if you're ready to grow your revenue, I have a little gift for you. Download my Revenue for Impact guidebook at wendyvelos.com/guide. Until the next episode.